We're in the City of God, and this isn't just another neighborhood in Rio de Janeiro, it's an open scar, a place marked by extreme poverty, the absence of the state, and at the same time, a community of hardworking, humble people living side by side with some of the most feared criminals Brazil has ever known. Here, fate could put you in the path of someone like Rocket, a kid who just wanted to survive and live a quiet life, or in the path of someone like Lil Zay, who was born dreaming of becoming the king of crime, and ended up responsible for countless deaths. Two extremes breathing the same air, walking through the same dusty alleys, growing up surrounded by the same streets, yet choosing completely different paths. The story starts in one of Rio's favelas, the City of God, where a group of armed boys led by Lil Zay is running after a chicken. A few shots are fired, but the bird is way too fast. Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, Rocket is strolling down the street chatting with a friend, saying he wants to stay far away from Lil Zay because crossing his path could mean ending up dead. But, as if destiny itself had been listening, the chicken bolts straight toward Rocket's feet. Right behind it, Lil Z shows up with his crew and yells at Rocket to grab the bird. Before Rocket can react, a police car pulls up in the distance. Armed officers jump out. Suddenly, Rocket finds himself in the middle of a standoff. On one side, Lil Zay and his gang, on the other, the cops. And Rocket is caught right in the center. The tension is so thick, it feels like the air gets heavier. Like one tiny spark could blow everything up. But before the shootout begins, the film freezes on Rocket's face. The camera holds, and we're dragged into a flashback traveling back to years earlier. Now, it's the 1960s, Rocket is still a little kid, playing soccer on a dirt field. He misses a save and gets laughed at by another boy. Suddenly, two kids show up with an intimidating presence, Benny and Lil Dice. The tension rises until Caballera appears, older and already part of the legendary Tender Trio. He grabs the ball and starts juggling it with skill that grabs everyone's attention. But the vibe shifts when a partner calls his name. Without thinking twice, Caballera kicks the ball high into the air, pulls out a gun, and shoots it, bursting it mid-air. Hey, vai ficar de bobó? Não acredito que vai negar fogo. That's how the movie introduces us to the Tender Trio, Caballera, Clipper, and Goose. Right after, we see them in action, faces covered, guns in hand, chasing down a gas truck through the dusty streets of the City of God. In seconds, they take control of the truck, but instead of keeping everything, they hand out some of the gas tanks to the locals. They look like a twisted version of Robin Hood, mixing crime with generosity, which made the community respect them and even protect them. But criminal celebrations never last long. From behind, Lil Dice hears police sirens and warns the others. The trio runs through the alleys they knew better than anyone. When they reach a soccer field, they rip off their shirts and blend in with the kids playing, as if nothing had happened. After pulling off the heist, Goose, who happens to be Rocket's older brother, hands Rocket some of the stolen money, telling him to say it came from honest work. The film then takes a moment to show us the raw reality of the City of God at the time. Dirt roads, no electricity, no sewage, and crushing poverty. It was the place where the government dumped poor families who had lost their homes to floods or fires. A forgotten corner of the city treated like a warehouse for people no one else cared about.
Não tem onde morar? Manda pra Cidade de Deus. Lá não tinha luz, não tinha asfalto.
Later on, Rocket and his friends are swimming in the river, and he makes it clear he doesn't want to be a cop or a criminal, because in both cases, the risk is the same, ending up with a bullet in the head and a closed casket funeral. But Lil Dice, he was different. His eyes lit up whenever he talked about crime. He idolized the Tender Trio and wanted to be part of them for real. The problem was that to the trio, he was still just a kid, useful only for small tasks. Wanting to change that, Lil Dice comes up with what he thinks is a brilliant idea: robbing a motel. At first, the trio laughs in his face, but then realizes it could actually be a good move. After all, motels are full of drunk, wealthy, distracted people. Even though the plan was his, Lil Dice gets stuck with lookout duty. His job is simple: if the cops show up, he's supposed to fire a shot out the window to alert the others. Reluctantly, he accepts, hoping it'll get him closer to the action next time. The heist starts. Employees are tied up, rooms are invaded, cash and jewelry get snatched, then Lil Dice pulls the trigger. The trio immediately panics, thinking the cops have arrived, and they ditch everything to escape, stealing a client's car as a getaway. And this is where the story takes a darker turn, because Lil Dice is about to prove he was never born just to be a lookout while others had the fun. Remember how the Tender trio thought he'd been caught by the police? That was the story in their heads. But the truth was something else. Lil Dice wasn't caught, he wasn't hurt, he was alive, holding real firepower in his hands. That shot out the window, it wasn't because he saw cops, he just wanted to feel the weight and sound of that gun. And to take it even further, one of the heaviest scenes of the film happens right there. Lil Dice storms back into the motel and kills every hostage, committing one of the bloodiest massacres the City of God had ever seen.
Que foi, moleque? Teu amigo já levou tudo? Tá querendo o quê, moleque?
While Lil Dice was drunk on the power he'd just felt, the Tender trio was racing off in the stolen car until they crashed straight into a bar. The damage was serious, so they threatened everyone inside to keep quiet and then split up. Two ran off into the woods, while the other tried to throw the cops off by firing shots into the air, but the bar owner, a man named Paraiba, wasn't about to let it slide. Without making noise, he tipped off the police, telling them exactly where the gang might be hiding. From that moment, they were hunted all night long. Cops swarmed the area, getting dangerously close to their hideouts, almost catching them, until Caballera pulled off a distraction that saved everyone. The next day, Caballera found shelter in a woman's house, who later became his girlfriend.
Que foi, homem? Porra, Maracanã, os homens estão atrás de mim.
Clipper, shaken by the close call, realized he was living on borrowed time. The cops wanted blood, and he felt if he didn't quit now, he'd end up dead. He decided to walk away from crime and surrender his life to God. One day he was even stopped by 2 police officers, but nothing happened to him. He took that as a divine sign that it was time to change for good. Meanwhile, Goose went back home, but his father didn't welcome him with open arms. The old man didn't want excuses or dirty money. He gave his son one last chance to straighten up. Goose stashed his gun in a box and made Rocket swear never to touch it. The trio thought the motel incident would blow over quickly. What they didn't count on was the nightmare that Lil Dice had left behind. All the hostages had been found dead, and the crime turned into one of the most brutal massacres in the history of the City of God. The pressure hit the cops hard. Politicians demanded results, newspapers kept hammering them, and what followed was a season of terror. Police raided houses, tore everything apart, dragged suspects into the streets, and worst of all, no one in the community dared to talk.
Alguém ia preso, alguém estava mal. Mas ninguém nunca via nada.
Months go by, and Caballera is still hiding out at his girlfriend's place. By now, she's pregnant, and the fear of the future weighs on her. She asks what kind of life they could possibly give their child if the father is constantly on the run from the police. The two make a decision. They're going to leave the City of God for good. The next day, we see Goose selling fish with his father, and as usual, trouble finds him. He starts flirting with a customer, not just any woman, but the wife of Paraiba, the bar owner who already wanted him dead. The flirting escalates into an affair, and the two end up in bed together. But their secret doesn't last long. When Paraiba finds out, he loses control. In a fit of rage, he kills his own wife with a shovel. As he hides the body inside his home, a neighbor spots him and alerts the police. That same day, Caballera and his girlfriend make their move, trying to escape the favela. They spot a man driving through and put a gun to his head, forcing him out of the car to use it as a getaway. But nothing is ever easy. The car breaks down, and Caballera has to push it to get it running again. At that exact moment, Paraiba, still boiling with anger, notices him and tips off the police. Moments later, officers show up firing. Caballera manages to push the car until it starts, but before he can get in, he's riddled with bullets in the back. His pregnant girlfriend watches in horror as his body collapses in the gutter, surrounded by onlookers, and a photographer who captures the scene. That image becomes crucial later because it's the first time Rocket sees a photographer at work, sparking in him the dream of becoming one himself. That afternoon, Goose hears the news about Caballera's death, and the thought of leaving the City of God once and for all becomes stronger. But before he can escape, he runs into Lil Dice and Benny. The two are leaning against a pile of bricks, splitting money from their robberies. Ever since the motel massacre, they've been surviving on the streets, stealing non-stop, and already living fully in the world of crime. Goose, desperate and reckless, takes their money without thinking twice. But Lil Dice doesn't forgive. With cold precision, he grabs the same gun Goose had lent him during the motel heist and empties the clip into him. It was his way of sending a message. Anyone who disrespected Lil Dice would end up the same way. At that moment, two things became turning points in the history of the City of God. First, the final collapse of the Tender trio. Second, the birth of a name that would echo through the favela with both fear and respect, Lil Zay. No longer the boy people brushed aside, he was now consumed by a new ambition. Mercy was gone. From that moment forward, every rival taken down, every confrontation won, only gave him more power and more followers. Young men who saw in him not just strength, but also the promise of a life where nobody could ever humiliate them again. With Benny as his right-hand man, Lil Zay began plotting something bold, taking over every single drug corner in the area. It wasn't just about money, it was about power, about becoming the king of a territory that had always been split among small bosses. But before claiming his throne in the underworld of the City of God, he sought out the blessing of a shaman.
Menino não te chama mais dadinho. De menino chama Jé Pequeno, Jé Pequeno, Jé Pequeno.
Surrounded by smoke and chants, he was reborn with a new name, Lil Zay. And that transformation wasn't just symbolic. By adopting this name, he buried whatever was left of the boy he once was. The day after his baptism, the City of God turned into a battlefield. Drug spots were raided, bosses were either executed or forced to kneel before the new ruler. Those who accepted his leadership got a spot in his crew. Those who resisted, well, Lil Zay made sure they would never bother him again. In just one single day, he practically took control of the entire City of God, except for one small area run by Carrot, a friend of Benny's. And it was only because of Benny that Lil Zay agreed to spare Carrot. Still, his sharp tongue couldn't help repeating, "One day, we'll take that spot too." Meanwhile, far from this bloody war, Rocket was still chasing a different life. He studied, made new friends, and always carried around a simple camera he had bought after years of saving up, using it to capture what he saw. That camera was a constant reminder of the day, as a kid, when he first watched a photographer snap Cabalera's death. Among his new friends was Angelica, a girl with an easy smile and a jealous boyfriend named Tiago, a redhead already hooked on sniffing powder. Angelica and Rocket grew close, and during one of their hangouts while smoking, Rocket offered to get her some weed, hoping it would bring him closer to her heart.
Na boca do neguinho buscar pra você.
But Rocket was terrified of Lil Z, so he decided to buy from one of the few drug spots that hadn't fallen under Zay's control, the apartments. What he didn't know was that Destiny hates safe routes. While Rocket was there, Lil Zay and his crew stormed the place, determined to complete his mission of owning the entire City of God. In the chaos, Rocket was mistaken for one of the dealers and almost killed on the spot. He was only spared because Benny recognized him as the younger brother of one of the Tender Trio members. From that moment, Lil Zay and Benny were solidified as the most powerful men in the City of God. Ironically, their rise brought a strange kind of peace to the neighborhood. With the territory united and the cops on their payroll, random shootouts became rare. Lil Zay punished even small crimes with the same brutality he used against rivals, enforcing an order that always worked in his favor. During this so-called peace, Tiago and Angelica broke up. Tiago sank deeper into his addiction and eventually became one of Benny's regular clients. One day, after a drug deal, Benny handed Tiago a stack of cash and asked him to buy clothes that matched his style. The result? A flashy urban look that made Benny stand out wherever he went. And it worked.
Não, tem mais ali embaixo. Se essa.
At one of the many parties that had become common in the newly pacified City of God, Angelica met Benny. All it took was a smile, a confident gesture, and that striking new look for sparks to fly. Benny had the same kind of charm that once drew Angelica to Tiago, only now it came with danger, intensity, and power. For Rocket, losing the girl of his dreams to Benny was the final straw. He wanted nothing more than to get as far away from the City of God as possible. In an attempt to change his life, he'd landed a simple job at a small grocery store in a nearby neighborhood. The plan was clear: save up money, wait for the inevitable day he'd get fired, because deep down he knew that job wouldn't last, and then use his severance pay to finally buy his first professional camera, chasing his dream of becoming a photojournalist. But as you've probably noticed by now, life had no intention of making things easy for our protagonist. One day, a group of kids from the City of God itself stormed into the grocery store where Rocket worked and stole everything they could carry. Since Rocket knew some of those boys by sight, the store owner didn't think twice before accusing him of being an accomplice. The result? Fired for cause.
Ele dá oportunidade para essas pessoas da cidade de Deus e eles não dão valor nenhum.
E meu fundo de garantia?
Que fundo de garantia?
Just like that, his job, his savings, and the dream of buying that new camera were gone. He was left with nothing. No girl, no job, no prospects, and a heavy load of frustration on his back. What was a personal disaster for Rocket became a strategic nightmare for Lil Z. Those robberies by the child gang were drawing way too much police attention, and everyone in the City of God knew that the last thing Zay wanted was cops sniffing around his business. Benny tried to reason with him, saying they were just kids and it would be better to handle things peacefully. But patience wasn't exactly Zay's strong suit. He gathered a small crew to hunt the kids down, and after some chasing, 2 of them were caught. Then came Zay's brutal style of punishment, the false choice. Want to take a bullet in the foot or in the hand? No matter what they answered, he shot them in the opposite spot.
Na mãozinha, né?
And it didn't stop there. He pulled in a teenager eager to join his gang and forced him to prove his loyalty by executing one of the kids on the spot. Meanwhile, Rocket was more convinced than ever that being a good guy got you nowhere. In his head, criminals had everything: money, respect, women, and him, trying to play it straight, had nothing. That's when he and a friend decided to try a robbery. The gun, the same one his brother had left behind. The target, a bus. But inside that bus was someone unexpected. Knockout Ned, a former soldier with an easy smile and a calm presence. It was impossible not to like him. That was enough to make Rocket and his buddy drop the plan right there. They tried again later, but during the second attempt, the cashier was so beautiful and actually seemed into Rocket that instead of money, he walked out with her phone number. On the third attempt, they ended up giving a ride to a lost stranger and, believe it or not, became friends with him. It was almost comical. Rocket couldn't succeed even as a criminal.
Mestre na arte de apertar baseado. Se eu tivesse a mesma habilidade com as mulheres...
While Rocket struggled, Benny and Angelica grew closer. Eventually, they made plans to leave everything behind and live together on a small farm far away. An unlikely but sweet romance, if not for one detail: Lil Zay hated the idea of losing his most loyal partner. Out of jealousy, he tried to get himself a girlfriend too. He approached a young woman, only to be told she was already taken by none other than Knockout Ned. The humiliation burned deep, so much so that Zay confronted Ned in public, but even that didn't ease the bitterness. Desperate not to lose Benny, Zay begged him to stay, but Benny had made up his mind. Amid all this tension, Benny decided to give Rocket a gift, a camera. But Zay, boiling with jealousy, snatched it away for himself. And it was in this storm of rivalry and resentment that tragedy struck. At a party filled with flashing lights and loud music, a gunshot rang out. The target was Lil Zay, but in the chaos, Benny was the one who fell. Benny's death ripped away the last break holding Zay back. If he was already feared before, now he was completely unhinged. With no emotional anchor left, he was pure chaos. And when someone like that has no limits, it's only a matter of time before everything explodes. Consumed by rage and paranoia, Zay convinced himself that the hit had been ordered by Carrot, his declared rival. Without hesitation, he gathered his armed men and set out for revenge. But the truth was different. The shooter wasn't Carrot. It was a young man seeking revenge on Zay himself. The problem was, by killing Benny, he had also destroyed the only shield protecting him from Zay Pequeno. Now, he was in the direct crosshairs of the most dangerous man in the city of God. On his way to track down the shooter, fate puts Lil Zay face to face with a couple, the same girl who had turned him down earlier, now walking with her boyfriend. For anyone else, this would have been just a random encounter. But not for Zay. Still burning with humiliation and driven by cruelty that seemed bottomless, he commits one of the most despicable acts in the entire story. He assaults the young woman in front of her boyfriend just to prove that no one could ever challenge him. The message was crystal clear: in the city of God, he was the one in charge. But the violence didn't stop there. Sometime later, Zay stormed into Knockout Ned's house and killed several of his family members. That kind of brutality was never going to go unanswered. This was the moment Carrot saw his opening. He approached Ned, who was boiling with rage and desperate for justice. Fueled by hatred, Ned accepted Carrot's support, guns, ammo, and manpower. An unlikely alliance was born, and with it, a bloody war began. On one side, Lil Zay pulling together everyone who had beef with Carrot. On the other, Carrot and Knockout Ned gathering all those who had suffered at Zay's hands. But there was a problem. Carrot's side didn't have enough money to sustain a war of this size. The solution? Robberies. Ned agreed, but with one condition: no killing innocents. The reality, though, was different. Once the bullets started flying, it was impossible to keep hands clean. In one heist, Ned himself ended up shooting a security guard right in front of the man's son.
No terceiro assalto, a exceção virou regra.
With money coming in, the war exploded across the city of God. Gunfire echoed constantly, tension was everywhere, and every corner could be an ambush. Meanwhile, Rocket's life was unexpectedly taking a turn for the better. He landed a job at a newspaper in the city. Around the same time, Lil Zay decided he wanted to show the whole country who really ran things. He called Rocket over, handed him a wad of cash, and asked him to develop photos of his gang, men armed to the teeth, flaunting power and control. But when Rocket went to the dark room, Zay's pictures got mixed in with the paper's regular regular assignments. The result? His face and his weapons splashed across the front page of the newspaper. Rocket panicked. He thought for sure this meant he was a dead man. Furious, he even argued with people at the paper, blaming them for putting his life on the line. But to his surprise, Lil Zay loved it. He was proud, thrilled to see himself as a front-page criminal celebrity.
Como que é o nome do seu amigo que tirou as fotos? É o Busca-Pé. Busca-Pé? Moleque é bom, mano. Vamos levar pra rapaziada ver, mano.
At the same time, Rocket avoided going back to the City of God. A close co-worker invited him to stay at her place, and after a long night together, Rocket finally lost his virginity. The next day, Lil Zay decided to grow his army at any cost. To do that, he began recruiting kids, ironically, the very same child gang he had once tortured months before. With them now under his command, he threw a massive party. In the middle of the celebration, a chicken managed to escape the barbecue. And here's where the story comes full circle. The same chicken from the opening scene. The bird darts through the streets, Lil Zay and his crew chase after it, and Rocket. Once again, he finds himself in the middle of a standoff between the gang and the police. Only these cops weren't heroes, they were dirty, selling guns to both sides, and now they'd come to collect a debt from Zay. But seeing the heavy firepower Zay's crew had, they realized collecting wasn't going to be that simple. The cops retreated. Their retreat, however, opened the door for Carrot and knock out Ned's faction. They launched a surprise attack, catching Zay's crew off guard. A violent gunfight broke out, forcing Zay's men to scatter. In the chaos, Lil Zay tried to escape in a car, but he crashed and got trapped inside. Knockout. Ned moved in, finger on the trigger, ready to finally get revenge. But just before he could pull the trigger, he spotted a young boy from his own gang wounded nearby. This kid had joined Ned, claiming he wanted revenge on Zay, who supposedly killed his father. The truth? His father was actually the security guard Ned himself had killed during a robbery. The boy took his chance. As Ned turned to help, the kid shot him dead. After a few minutes, the police returned to the scene, and surprisingly, they only arrest Carrot. As for Lil Z, they take him somewhere else, where the same cops who should have been stopping him start robbing him instead, forcing him to hand over cash and promising they'll keep collecting bribes in the future. But the moment the cops leave, Lil Zay finds himself surrounded by the same kids he had armed not long ago. The boss's smirk vanishes instantly. They weren't there to play. They were there for revenge, for all the pain Zay had caused their friends. Without hesitation, they open fire, ending Lil Zay's reign right there in the streets.
Esse é pelo nosso amigo, filha da puta! Ataque soviético nele!
His rule was over, but the City of God wasn't. The power vacuum he left behind was bound to be filled by another criminal, just like it always had been. And Rocket? The photos he took that day made the front page of every paper in the country, finally giving him the chance to escape the hell he grew up in, that place known as the City of God. Two boys, raised in the same neighborhood, breathing the same violence but choosing completely different paths. One sank deeper into crime, the other used art to break free from it.
Aí, tu já ouviu falar no tal de falange vermelho que tá chegando aí?
Não, mas se ele vir, a gente passa ele.
And now, it's your turn. Drop your movie recommendations for the next videos down below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.